Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another awesome edition of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. My name is Joe Grabowski, and for those who don't know already, we're all about bringing science, adventure, and conservation to classrooms all around North America and beyond, hopefully. So I'm very excited to have Nizar Ibrahim joining us again today, and this will be his second Exploring by the Seat of His Pants session. I'll give Nizar a little intro, and then he can take over. So Nizar is a paleontologist. He's also a National Geographic emerging explorer, and he does a lot of his work in Northern Africa, so regions like Morocco. And his fieldwork takes him to a lot of really exciting, interesting places where it could be anything from flooding to sandstorms to high heat that he has to deal with each day, even being escorted by armed guards in some areas. So, Nizar, how are you doing today?
Very good.
All right. Well, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for hanging out with another group of students. We've got a good group from across the U.S., and we even have a class in Canada joining us today. So I'll let you take over.
All right. Well, so let me see. I'll share screen so I can actually show you some images.
Yeah.
Let me just set that up. Okay. Okay, let's see.
So your best option, what usually works best, is clicking the green rectangle and selecting the whole screen option. Yeah.
I'm doing that. Okay. Working?
There we go. I see me. That's a good sign.
Okay. Great. So let me just start the slideshow. Okay, that's all right. Can you see that?
Yep, there it goes.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm a paleontologist, although sometimes I almost prefer to describe myself as a time traveler, because that's really what paleontologists are doing. So what we're doing is piecing together a really incredible story. And that story is the history of life on our planet. So everything that's alive today is a part of this incredible story. Now, most of the creatures that have lived on our planet are extinct. 99% of all life that ever existed on this planet is extinct. So paleontology is really important when you want to reconstruct this series of events. And so, you know, if you're a paleontologist, you can work on all kinds of different creatures. I mostly work on animals from the age of dinosaurs. So when I travel back in time, I travel back to places like this, for example, strange ancient seas with marine monsters bigger than any shark alive today. And so you get to see these really bizarre alien worlds. And that's really why I describe this as time traveling, because this is as close as you'll get to actually seeing all these incredible creatures. And I've been interested in paleontology from a very early age. I just loved the idea of finding out more about all these animals. I've always loved animals. And I also love the idea of traveling to far-flung corners of the world to dig up their fossils. I just love the idea of traveling to interesting places like the Sahara, for example. And of course, you get to see creatures that are so different from anything that is alive today. I'm just showing you one example here. This is a giant amphibian, a temnospondyl. And you can see it's got lots and lots of different teeth in its skull roof. I mean, there's nothing like this around today. So many of the creatures we're working on are really like aliens from outer space. You know, they're very different from animals alive today. And of course, we get to work on some very charismatic creatures like T-Rex. This is one of the most famous dinosaurs. And one thing you'll notice on this T-Rex is, well, actually, I'll ask you, do you know what's unusual about this T-Rex? Anything that you notice?
No arm? No, he only has 2 legs.
Yeah, it's got little arms, that's right, but there's something, look at the covering of the skin.
Furry.
Yeah, it's furry, and you don't often see a furry or feathery T-Rex, but T-Rex may actually have been feathered, because we know that feathers first appeared in dinosaurs. You know, we think of feathers as something that is very typical of birds, but turns out that dinosaurs invented feathers long, long, long ago, and they weren't used for flying. They're used for insulation. We don't know if T-Rex itself was feathered, but we know that many other predatory dinosaurs, like Velociraptor, for example, smaller predatory dinosaurs, were in fact feathered. So this is another example of how paleontology helps us understand the history of life on our planet. You know, birds are around today, but without paleontology, we wouldn't know that feathers and all these other things that are typical of birds actually first appeared in dinosaurs. So dinosaurs started this, you know, feathers and hollow bones, and so they are really the ancestors of today's birds. So in you know, if you want to be scientifically accurate, you can say that birds are dinosaurs. This is one group of dinosaurs that survived the big bad extinction that wiped out T-Rex and many other creatures. So this is just to give you a very brief introduction to paleontology, so you can see what we're doing, why it's important. But now I'll talk more specifically about the work that I'm doing. So I'm very interested in predatory animals. This is a giant alligator here. And I've always loved finding out more about animals that are poorly understood. You know, we don't know much about crocodiles. And as Joe can tell you, we don't know much about sharks, but we also don't know much about dinosaurs. So those were the kinds of animals that always interested me. And as I mentioned earlier, I also loved the idea of traveling to far-flung corners of the world. And for me, the most interesting place out there is the Sahara. It's a really incredible place. And so that's, you know, I combined those two things, my love for poorly understood animals and my desire to travel to these far-flung corners of the world. And so that's what I'm doing as a paleontologist, traveling to the Sahara, trying to uncover remains of really bizarre, poorly understood animals. One of the other reasons why I actually went to the Sahara is that over 100 years ago, a German paleontologist called Ernst Stromer uncovered some incredible fossils in North Africa. So he was one of the very, very early explorers of the Sahara, and he found some truly incredible dinosaur fossils, bones of giant predatory dinosaurs and crocodiles and big plant-eating dinosaurs. And so I thought, you know, this is what I would like to do. Go to the Sahara and try and find a treasure trove of fossils. Unfortunately, Stromer's fossils were all destroyed in World War II. So he lost all of his finds. And so we were kind of back to square one. You know, we knew a few things about these dinosaurs of the Sahara after he made these discoveries, and then everything was destroyed in the war. So I kind of tried to follow in his footsteps and rediscover some of these bizarre dinosaurs of the Sahara. This is the place where I do my field work. It's a place called the Kemkem. It's in the border region between Morocco and Algeria in North Africa. And it's a very remote place. It's a beautiful place. You have all these beautiful sunsets and dunes and oases, but it's also a dangerous place. You know, the Sahara is a very harsh environment. You sometimes see dead animals that didn't make it. You know, they died of thirst. This is a dead camel here. And of course, the Sahara is a place with no hospitals, no police stations, nothing. You're completely on your own. So you have to be really well prepared. And it's really hard work working in the Sahara. Of course, it's very hot, as you can imagine. But this part of the Sahara is also very rocky, and there are big mountains. and so you spend a lot of time climbing, and it's very dangerous climbing. You can see on the slopes of this hill, you can see there are lots of boulders and rocks, so it's very unstable, and it's a lot of hard work getting up there, but that's where we find the fossils. And when we go to the Sahara, we usually go with Land Rover cars. Those are kind of the only cars that can survive the desert. And typically we take more than just one car. We'll take 2 or 3 cars in case one breaks down, because that does happen. And of course, you don't want to find yourself in the middle of the desert and your car is broke down. So usually you have to bring at least 2 or 3 cars. And then we go out there, and the further we go, the more remote it gets, and the fewer and fewer people you see. And at some point, there are no more roads, just a few camels. And then, before you know it, you're in a place like this. This is a typical chem picture. So you can see that this place looks like Mars. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Mars, but it's the red planet, and the chem looks very much like Mars. It's just shifting red sands, and you're just there on your own. So it's a really unusual place, but it's also very beautiful. And here on this picture, this is another shot from the chem. You can see 2 of our cars in the background. And so you feel very small when you're there, and you go like, well, where do we even begin? Where are we going to find the fossils? It's very difficult to know where to start. So what we're doing is we look at geological maps. So these are maps that tell you where rocks of a certain age can be found. So we look for places where rocks from the age of dinosaurs are found. And so then we go there, and then we take out our binoculars and we scan the horizon, trying to find interesting spots where we can maybe uncover some fossils. But it's a lot of work, and you spend a lot of time walking around for hours and hours before you find anything. And then, if you're patient and you have a good eye for fossils, you will eventually find things. So we find, in the Sahara, bones of dinosaurs, teeth. We also find dinosaur tracks. This here is a dinosaur footprint. You can see the 3 toes. You can just about make them out. 3 toes like a bird footprint. So again, very bird-like foot in a dinosaur. So we find bones, footprints. This here is a tooth. I'm holding a tooth in my hand, tooth of a large predatory dinosaur. So those are the kinds of things we find, typically fairly small fossils. But sometimes we get lucky and we find truly amazing things, like this here. This is a giant dinosaur bone. It's the largest dinosaur bone found in this part of the Sahara. It's an upper arm bone of a giant plant-eating dinosaur. And again, we found it on one of these mountains, so we had to carry it down the mountain and get it into our car. It was a lot of work, but it was a really incredible find. So this is just about half of the upper arm bone of a giant plant-eating dinosaur. You can just imagine how big this creature would have been. And of course, when we find fossils, we have to make sure that they're all labeled, so we know exactly where each fossil was found and which bones belong together. It's very important to collect all of this information, because we really want to understand everything we can about this ancient ecosystem. So it's not just about going out there to find dinosaurs. It's really about resurrecting or reconstructing an entire lost world. It was a really incredible world out there, because right now the Sahara is very dry. So you're just looking at this rocky Mars-like place. But 100 million years ago, that's how old these fossils are. 100 million years ago, this was a very different kind of place. And we know that from the fossils we find. We find fossils of giant crocodile-like predators, like this one here, Elosuchus. Some of these crocs were as long as a school bus. So it's a really, really unusual ecosystem with giant predators and big rivers. Turns out that this place was home to a giant river system, and inside the river system, different kinds of creatures were trying to survive. Giant sawfish, the crocodiles, big car-sized fish, and also a giant dinosaur. So this is another creature we discovered recently. This dinosaur is called Spinosaurus. It is the longest predatory dinosaur ever found. It's longer than T-Rex even, but it's a very unusual dinosaur. It has a very narrow snout and a long neck and paddle-like feet and a giant sail on its back. It's a really, really strange creature. And we think that this was really the top predator in this river system. It was a fish-eating dinosaur. And just to give you an idea of the size, this is our Spinosaurus skeleton. This is the reconstructed skeleton. And you can see how big the head and neck of Spinosaurus are. It's a really, really impressive creature and very, very different from any other predatory dinosaur. But the most interesting thing about this particular dinosaur is not so much that it was so big, it's really that it was a water-loving dinosaur. We're saying that this is the first real swimming dinosaur, a dinosaur that has some really interesting anatomy or features in its skeleton that suggest that it spent a lot of time in the water. So it's a really, really strange creature. And maybe the big sail was part of this story, because if you're spending a lot of time in the water, the one part of the body that is going to be sticking out is this big sail. So maybe this was one way for this dinosaur to tell other dinosaurs, look at me, look at how big I am. Or maybe the males and females had different colors on their sails. But we think that the sail was a giant display structure, something to tell other dinosaurs, you know, look at my size, or maybe to attract a mate. And when we try to understand extinct creatures, we look at lots of other animals. So in the case of Spinosaurus, we looked at this animal here, Dimetrodon, which also has a big sail. We looked at living animals with frills and sails, like this lizard here, or this crested chameleon. So that's another fun part about paleontology. There's a lot of detective work involved, you know, a lot of detective work when you put together the skeletons, but there's also a lot of detective work involved when you actually try to understand the lifestyle of these extinct animals, because you usually have to look at living animals. And so, you know, it's a lot of fun. You learn a lot about living animals too when you study dinosaurs. So all this helped us understand our big predatory dinosaur from the Sahara. So we now know that Spinosaurus was a fish eater with long, slender jaws and conical teeth like a crocodile, and a big sail and paddle-like feet. So that was a really fun project. And if you want to find out more about Spinosaurus, there are a lot of documentaries online, and National Geographic put together a really interesting story about Spinosaurus, and that's also available online. And this is Spinosaurus when it gets out of the water. It's one of the many predators in this strange ecosystem. And that's another thing that I really like about working in the Sahara. The entire ecosystem is so different from other parts of the world. You know, in North America or in Canada, in the Cretaceous, you have, you know, T-Rex, you know, and T-Rex is the big predator and the undisputed ruler of its ancient world. But in the Sahara, you have several predators that are as big as T-Rex, and they all live at the same time in the same place. And then you have all these giant crocodiles and all kinds of other predators. It was a predator's paradise. And that's really unusual. So we're trying to understand that. And we think that the predators all lived there in the same place at the same time because they were eating rather different things. So Spinosaurus was eating fish, but it wasn't competing with some of the other big predators, like this one here, Carcharodontosaurus, which was eating dinosaurs. And then we have some flying reptiles in this ecosystem too, and they're eating different things again. So all the predators were really very specialized, and they're all eating slightly different things, so they were not competing with each other for food. And so we think that that's part of the answer to this question, how all these predators could coexist in the same ecosystem. This flying reptile, by the way, is the largest flying creature that ever lived in Africa. We named this creature in 2010 Elanquus saharica. It means the phoenix of the desert. And it's a really incredible creature with a 20-foot wingspan and a really bizarre long jaw, like a giant stork or a heron. And again, in the same place, we found fossils of other flying reptiles. So we know that there were at least 3 different kinds of flying reptiles, some with really short skulls, some with teeth, some with long, slender jaws. So again, lots and lots of different predators. So when we look at this ecosystem, I always describe it as the most dangerous place in the history of our planet, because you have all these predators in the air, on land, in the water. I think if we could travel back in time to this place, it would be a very, very dangerous place. There would be many, many different ways to die in this ecosystem, so you would have to be really, really careful. And one thing I want to tell you, because I think you enjoyed watching all these beautiful images of all these extinct creatures, and I think I should mention this here. All of the artwork you saw today is the work of this gentleman here, Davide Bonadonna. He's a paleo artist. That's what he does for a living. So he's not a paleontologist. He's an artist that draws things like dinosaurs and other extinct creatures. And I work with him on many different projects. And together we come up with ideas like this one here, for example. And I tell him what I would like to see, and then he puts it together and paints it. And as you can see, he's very, very talented. So this is one way to share these strange ecosystems and lost worlds with other people. So, you know, as a paleontologist, you get to work with all these different people. You work with, you know, rock scientists, geologists, you work with biologists, you work with artists like Davide. So again, that's another thing that I really like about my job. It never gets boring. You know, you can travel to faraway places, you work with lots of different people, and you can always uncover new bizarre animals. So for me, it's the best job in the world. And it's a really magical experience, because, you know, especially if you're working in the Sahara, you know, it's a sea of sand now, today, but when you go out there, you can actually bring back these strange creatures from deep time, these ghosts from deep time. And if you close your eyes, you will see this big river system in front of your eyes. You know, even though you're in the Sahara, one of the hottest places in the world, but, you know, because of the fossils and the information they give us, you can close your eyes and see this vast river system with giant predatory dinosaurs and big fish and crocodiles. So it's a truly magical experience for me. And I don't know if there are any people here today that would like to become paleontologists, but I can tell you that it's definitely a really fun job. It's hard work. You have to work really hard to get there, but working as a paleontologist, I think, is fantastic, because, as I said, you can be a real-life time traveler. And I think I'll end here and get ready for your questions.
Okay, Nizar, that, as always, that was amazing. I love watching your presentation. I love the aspect of time travel, and the pictures that go along with it really go a long way to really bringing it to life. And like Nizar mentioned, if you do go online, you can find some video and some longer form lectures where you can actually see a little bit of the video that's been put together. So it's definitely worth checking out. So we have 4 classrooms joining us live today, and we also have 7 or 8 classrooms who are just viewing online, so I can see just from the bottom. So any of the classrooms who are viewing online, on the left corner of your screen is a chat sidebar. It's a blue icon. If you click on that, you can tell us where you're watching from, and you can also enter a question or two, and we'll be able to get to some of them. But let's visit with the classrooms we have joining us now. Nizar, are you still there?
Yep, I'm there.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. So we have 4 classrooms joining us. We have Mrs. Simone's grade 2s from Kansas. We have Mrs. Cabone's grade 5s in New Jersey. We've got a couple 4th grade classes, Mrs. Lambert's and Mrs. Byers from West Jefferson, Ohio. And then Mr. Pichet's from Durham, Ontario has some grade 4-5s joining us today. So why don't we visit our class in Kansas first and see if they have a couple questions.
We're trying to get there.
Do you know how heavy one of the dinosaurs might have been?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, we can't really weigh the dinosaurs because we just have their bones. And so we have to try and estimate how much the muscles and the organs and everything else and the skin weighed. But you know, we can estimate the dinosaurs' weight fairly accurately. What we do know is that some really, really big plant-eating dinosaurs would have weighed more than 60 or 70 tons. So that's the weight of a small herd of elephants. So it's several elephants. So some dinosaurs were very, very heavy. Others were very small, like little birds, and they would not have weighed very much. So in dinosaurs, we really have a very wide range of weights and sizes.
All right. Let's grab another question.
Are the dinosaurs cold-blooded or warm-blooded?
That's a very, very good question. Are dinosaurs warm or cold-blooded? We are fairly confident that at least some dinosaurs would be what we call warm-blooded. Again, it's quite difficult. We can't just measure the temperature of a dinosaur very accurately. But some dinosaurs show a lot of signs that they were probably warm-blooded. They're very agile animals, fast runners, and there's some modern techniques we can use that also strongly suggest that at least some dinosaurs were more or less warm-blooded. But we don't know if that was the case for all dinosaurs. Some of the very, very large plant-eating dinosaurs I mentioned would have been so big, even if they were cold-blooded, because of their size, they really wouldn't lose much heat. So maybe they didn't really have to be warm-blooded in the same way that a mammal is. So it is possible that there were different kinds of temperature regulation models in dinosaurs. But some of them were certainly very similar to birds and mammals in their thermoregulation.
Great question. So we'll probably have time to swing back for another one, but let's visit our grade 4-5s in Durham, Ontario. You guys have a question?
I have a question, which is, have you ever gotten to name a dinosaur?
Can you come closer to the microphone? I didn't hear that.
Have you ever named a dinosaur?
Oh, have you ever named a dinosaur? So we find a lot of different kinds of creatures in the Sahara. Some of them have already been named in the past. So Spinosaurus, the big water-loving dinosaur, for example, had been named in 1915, about 100 years ago. But the original bones were destroyed in the war, so we rediscovered this dinosaur. So that one already had a name. Other creatures don't have a name yet. So we found, for example, you know, the big sawfish that was a new species, but we also found a giant flying reptile, the one that I showed you, the giant winged predator We named that one Alanqua saharica. It means the phoenix of the desert. The phoenix is a creature from mythology, from old stories, and it's a flying bird-like creature. So we named that flying reptile, and we found some other fossils of new dinosaurs that we are planning to name, but the problem is sometimes you just find one or two bones, and I would prefer to wait until we have more bones before we actually name a new dinosaur. So we have named some new creatures, but it's a long process. You first have to make sure that this is not something that has already been named, and but it's a lot of fun, because if you have to come up with a name for something, you can use your imagination. Actually, maybe I'll ask you to help me with one of our new creatures. There's a crocodile-like predator we have to name. So if you can think of a good name, let me know.
All right, very cool. If they send any in, I will pass them your way for sure. What do you think, grade 4 5s? Do you have another question?
Yes. Have you ever felt endangered in any of your expeditions?
Okay, have I ever felt in danger? Well, I think it's normal to experience danger when you're going to a place like the Sahara, because if you don't feel danger, then you're not really being careful, because you have to know that there's you're going there with a team of people. You have to make sure that they all stay safe, and you have to deal with sandstorms and the heat, and there are smugglers and bandits in the Sahara. So that's one of the reasons why we sometimes need to go there with soldiers for protection. But I think the biggest issue we're facing is all the climbing. It's really dangerous climbing, because these slopes we have to climb up are very, very steep, and there are rocks all over the surface, so it's very unstable. And sometimes you miss a step, and the rocks will just shred your skin to pieces. So you always have to be careful. So yes, there are moments when we kind of have to face dangers, but then again, people face dangers in their everyday lives too. When people get in the car, there are car accidents, all kinds of things can happen. So there are dangers not just in the Sahara, but also in big cities in the US and elsewhere. So you just have to be smart and prepared.
All right, great question and an excellent point as well. West Jefferson, Ohio, grade 4s, your microphone is on. You have a couple questions.
When you found the Spinosaurus, was it female or male?
Well, I would love to know that, but unfortunately, because we only have the one good skeleton, there's really no way for us to tell. If we had more skeletons, and say, for example, half of the skeletons we find have this big sail, and the other half don't have a sail, then we might say, well, maybe these are actually males and females. And then we could try and figure out which one is which. There's some ways to do that. But right now, we just don't have enough skeletons, so we don't really know.
What's your question? How long did it take to put all the bones together on a Spinosaurus?
Okay, how long did it take us to put all the bones together? Well, that's a good question, because it took several years, but I was working on other projects at the same time, so it's difficult to say how long exactly that part of the project took. But it took several years, because I was trying to reconstruct the skeleton of Spinosaurus before we had even found the new skeleton. So just trying to figure out from the few bits and pieces we knew existed what the animal may have looked like. And so over time, we would always add new pieces to the skeleton and try to understand the anatomy a little better. Once we had the new skeleton, what we did is we built a digital skeleton. So we kind of built a dinosaur skeleton in the computer. We CT scan the bone, so that means we make a copy of the bone. So we have a copy of the bone in the computer, if you like, and then we put the bones together on the computer. and that helped us put together the skeleton. But that was only part of it. So I think all I can really say is it took us several years, yeah.
All right, so you'll just hear the announcements going on my end, but we'll switch over to Mrs. Capone's class. Thanks for waiting so patiently, and you can ask a couple questions now.
Okay. The models is Emily, Mackenzie, and
Hi, I'm Carrie.
Hi.
About how many fossils have you found?
Ooh, how many fossils have I found? That's a good question. I mean, in the Sahara, we discovered several thousands. So, I don't know. I guess my expedition teams uncovered about maybe 9,000 or 10,000 different fossils.
Wow. Thank you.
Sure.
From the bones, how do you know what type of dinosaur it is looking at the bones?
That's a great question, because sometimes we find a bone and we look at it and we go like, what is this? You know, is this a plant-eating dinosaur or a meat-eating dinosaur? And so what we do is we compare the bone with the bones of other dinosaurs that are known from almost complete skeletons. And usually you can tell from the shape of the bone what kind of dinosaur it is. So there's certain features in, say, you know, the skull bones or the leg bones that you only find in meat-eating dinosaurs. So, you know, if you find any of these, you know, oh, this is a meat-eating dinosaur. And then you look at different kinds of meat-eating dinosaur, and, you know, you try to narrow it down, and you might find that, you know, this is a dinosaur that is already known, or if it looks different from any other dinosaur that is known, then you know you have something new and you can name it. But basically what we're doing is we're comparing the bones we're finding to bones of other dinosaurs, and so that allows us to narrow it down. So again, it's a lot of detective work, but it works rather well.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, we have enough time. Let's swing back to each classroom one more time for a final question. So, Mrs. Capone's grade 5, since your mic's on, if you have another question.
I was wondering. Hi, my name is Christian.
Hi, Christian.
I was wondering, how can you tell that the bones go with each other, and how do you not put them on backwards or screw them up?
Well, it does happen that people get it wrong, because, again, these are creatures that are just like aliens from outer space. We can't look at modern-day animals because very often, you know, no modern-day animal looks anything like Spinosaurus, for example. But if we find bones of one dinosaur all in the same area, in the same place, and they all look like, you know, they're about the right size and they're all together, we know that these bones all belong to one animal. Then, of course, when we put them together, you're right, sometimes we can get it wrong, but it depends. So for Spinosaurus, for example, we have a foot that is almost complete, and you can actually see how the foot bones fit together. It's very easy to put the foot together. With the backbones, it's more difficult. We have a few backbones, and we know that there are backbones, but we're not sure, you know, 100% where exactly they fit on the back. So we kind of know roughly where they are, but we don't know for sure. So, you know, there's always a room for small errors, but we try to you know, keep the number of errors down. But, you know, that's what paleontology is like. You know, you put your dinosaur together, and then maybe 10 years later, someone else is going to find a more complete skeleton, and they'll say, oh, you know, you got this wrong and that wrong, and then, you know, we put together a new reconstruction, and that's how science works. You know, you're just always improving your scientific models or reconstructions.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, great question. Kansas in our grade 2s, you have a final question?
Yes, we do. Thanks.
Where is the Spinosaurus skeleton kept?
That's a good question. So the original bones have been returned to North Africa. They're in Morocco right now. But the mounted skeleton, the reconstruction that you saw, where I was standing next to the skull, that skeleton is in Italy right now. So it's an exhibit that is traveling around the world. It's an exhibit with Spinosaurus and lots of other dinosaurs from the Sahara. And people in Italy can see it now. It was in DC, in Washington before. After Italy, it's going to travel to Germany, to Berlin. It's going to be there for half a year, and then it's going to travel to other places, Barcelona, I think. So it's an exhibit that is traveling around the world, so people all around the world can meet Spinosaurus.
All right, awesome question. Mr. Pichet is grade 4-5s. Do you guys have one more question?
How long do you how many years do you go to school to be a parent?
How many years of school do you need to do before you become a paleontologist? So, well, when you finish your normal school, high school, then you have to go to university, and you have to study biology or zoology or geology or a combination of these, and that usually takes about 4 years. And then many people will do a master's degree, which takes 1 or 2 years, and then you have to do a PhD, which, if you want to be a professional paleontologist in a university or museum, and that takes another 3 to 6 years. So it takes quite a few years to get there, but it's worth it.
Okay, and then our grade 4s in Ohio. Your mic is on.
Thank you. How do you know if it's a dinosaur or a new discovered animal?
Well, that's a good question. Most of the time we know if we found a dinosaur bone, because dinosaur bones are quite easy to recognize. But having said that, sometimes we get it wrong. So some of my colleagues found a bone recently and thought that it was a tailbone of a predatory dinosaur, and they named a new predatory dinosaur, but then they found out, oh, actually it's a tailbone of a crocodile. So sometimes it can be difficult, and we get things wrong. But again, what we do is we look at our bone, we compare it to known dinosaur bones, and if it looks like something completely new or different, then we'll say, well, it's probably something new and different. But it's detective work and making a lot of comparisons.
For 2 weeks.
All right, so just bad timing here right now. There's announcements going on. Oh, I think they're done. Awesome. Well, Nizar, we're right on the 45-minute mark. That worked out perfectly.
Okay.
Great questions from all the classes joining.
Yeah,
at least 7 or 8 other classrooms who joined in as well, who were watching the live feed. So we had a good little connection with classrooms across North America. What I will do for the classrooms who did join in, this afternoon I'll send you another email with some links to some of the videos you can find online so your classrooms can dig a little bit deeper. So Nizar, I'm gonna, if you wanna maybe just leave the classes with one more thought, I'll turn their microphones on after that, and we can say goodbye and thank you.
Sure. Well, one more thought. That's, I guess, what I would tell people is, because I'm often asked, how exactly did you become a paleontologist? And many people think that, this is something that they can't really do. It's too difficult. But the way it began for me, it began with a book. I got a book on dinosaurs when I was 5 or 6 years old. And that's, when I really fell in love with science and paleontology. And I just, knew that that's what I wanted to do. And there are a lot of people that will tell you, oh, no, that's never going to work. And, but if you really, really love something, if you're really passionate about something, you should just stick with it and do it, because you don't want to be doing something in your life that you're not really passionate about. You'll just regret it. So whatever it is you're interested in, if there's something you really, really, really want to do, you should just do it. And you'll see you will almost certainly succeed if you really, really want to get it done. So that will be my final piece of advice. If you really love doing something, stick with it, no matter what other people are saying.
All right, great advice. Classrooms as well. Over the next several months, Nizar is doing some National Geographic live events in several cities. So take a look online at the Nat Geo live events, and you just might have them coming to a city close to you. Should definitely be worth checking out. I'm going to turn the microphones on, and we can say goodbye and thank you, and we'll sign off for today. So here we go. Mike's coming on. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining in, and we're signing off for today.